Good afternoon. Welcome to the latest Straight Up Hangouts. Today we are broadcasting from Australia with Benjamin Fleming and Josh Crawford. Welcome everybody. Today's topic is pushing the limits of Craft CMS's matrix field, and for this topic we thought it would be best to get the authors of Supertable and the Neo fields with us. To introduce everybody here, we have Tyler and Andrew. Tyler is the brains behind NY Studio 107.
Right. Say hi, Tyler.
Hi.
And we, Ben Fleming, who works at Spicy Web, but you might know him from his plugins Neo, Quickfield, Relabel. Ben has a knack for tackling those little things that you'd wish were slightly better in Craft and really making plugins to make them rock. And Josh Crawford, who works at the S Group. However, you may know him for his plugins, Supertable, FeedMe, Field Manager, CPNav, Workflow, and probably a few more on the list. It's great to have you all here today. And I'm Ben Parizek from Barrel Strength Design and the Sprout plugins. So let's get started. First up, I wanted to ask Josh and Ben. So Craft comes with this matrix field. Many people are quite happy with it. It does a lot of cool stuff. It gives people the ability to start creating repeating blocks for their content with varying field types. But as many cool things as people can do with it, they're just not happy still. And you two have taken your unhappiness farther than most and manifested it in new plugins. So what problems did you find with the existing matrix field, and how did you try to solve those?
I suppose Josh, want to go first?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to butt in there. Yeah, look, so matrix is awesome at what it does. It's really just really Supertable sort of started as a way to make the native table field, which some people actually really forget. I actually forget about it all the time. To just have it so that columns in your table field can be more than just textual fields. So where you might want to add, say, an asset field or a light switch field into a table field, you could do that. And then once you've sort of done, because you can of course have a table field in a matrix field at the moment, and that's really good for if you want to have multiple matrix blocks, then you want to have multiple rows in your table fields. That's great, but really I guess the reason for Supertable existing is so that you can have that sort of matrix in matrix style a little bit. It's not obviously true matrix in matrix, but it's pretty close to it. So so that was really the aim, just to have that extra layer of flexibility to be able to just have repeatable content that has repeatable content. So
great, and yeah, that basic table field was the way people started doing it, but Craft keeps that really simple purposely. Yeah. They don't want to make it fancy at all.
That's right.
Great. How about you, Ben?
Well, I guess in a similar vein, Neo was born out of just, I guess, mild frustration with some of the limitations with the matrix field. So it started out as like, I had a plugin called Matrix Group beforehand, and it was kind of like a test to see how matrix fields would work if you could add like hierarchy to them. So one of the main problems is, which Supertable also solves, is just that leveling of repeatable content. So Supertable in a matrix field, you'd be able to have multiple blocks, and then inside those blocks you could have multiple rows. Yeah, so Neo is sort of attempts to solve the same kind of thing, where you can sort of nest blocks and have repeatable content in blocks, but just in a different way. And it kind of just grew from there and couldn't help but add a whole bunch of other features to it, and yeah, so it's pretty much where Neo is.
So we have, as far as repeatable content goes in Craft, the most simple version is the table field, and then the matrix kind of takes the next level there and allows us to start adding any field we want and have groups of those fields together. And then you folks start kind of adding these new dimensions of what we're all kind of calling matrix within matrix, the ability to repeat content within content. And Josh, you seem to have taken the approach of, let's just take that table field and amp it up and make it capable of more content. And I believe your super table has a more horizontal layout to it, or maybe it has the option of both horizontal or vertical layout in how it approaches that.
Yeah, and that's right. And really, it started from I guess where it all started from was that initial. We just wanted the table field as is to be able to include different types of fields, and we really were keen on that. That column, that table layout, where we just needed to add extra fields to that layout, and that was sort of the first iteration, or the first layout option, hence why it's called super table. Was really just to supercharge a table field. In essence, actually, when we went to implement it, we started from a table field and wanted to try and make that more relational, but we quickly found out that the table field is very different to a matrix field in terms of implementation. Table fields store all their data in a single column in your fields table, and that's just because everything's plain text. So we actually started from how a matrix is implemented, and went backwards from there, basically, to make it look and act like a table field. So a little bit of a way around it, but in hindsight, it's actually worked out quite well in terms of using the matrix implementation. It just gives us a bit more flexibility, and in terms of migrating that to hopefully a bit more of a pixel and tonic style matrix in matrix, whatever cool thing they're going to do in the future. And that's something that's pretty important. A few people have often said that they're a bit hesitant about using a third-party field to control so much of their content, and that's completely valid. You don't want, the great thing about Craft is that you can do so much natively. We certainly don't want to take over and mess around with your content too much. So, in terms of a migration path, it's our sort of intention that hopefully you won't need super table one day, but we'll see where we go. So yeah, look, getting back to the implementation side of things, we've got essentially 3 different layouts that you can use. You've got a table layout, which is essentially, it looks like a table field. You've got different fields. You can use any native or third-party field, and they're in a column layout, just like a table. There's a row layout, which basically grew out of the need to just streamline the way that you show content, but being more flexible than a table field. Obviously, with a table field, you've got a set width, really, and if you've got 10 fields in each column, it's going to be impossible to actually use it feasibly. So the row layout really just lays them out in rows, but just in a bit more of a streamlined interface than, say, what the native matrix does, which, if you've got enough fields in a matrix field, it tends to take up a lot of screen real estate. So this just sort of streamlines this, and I'll show a few demos in a second.
Yeah, we'll jump into demos in a second here for those out there.
And then, sorry, just quickly, the third and final option is just a static field, which basically is just an easy way. We just wanted to be able to group a bunch of fields together visually. Just to make it a little bit neater for certain things. Like we've used them most commonly for say banner images, where you might have an image, you might have a heading, some description text, a button, being able to control overlays and opacities and a bunch of fields that just need to be visually grouped together. So that's really it. So
It sounds to me like a lot of the functionality was driven out of thinking of the content editors, right? Is that correct in terms of?
yeah, that's right.
In terms of, yeah, like you could do this in a matrix field, but the layout that Supertable is offering is for certain types of content, is a better experience for the people that are going to be editing it. Is that kind of your motivation for doing this?
Yeah, that's really it. And I really think that just about anything Supertable does can be done in a matrix field because it essentially is a matrix field. It's just really giving that option of laying it out in a more streamlined fashion. You know, if you I've got a few examples in our demo, but yeah, you're right. Really, it's just from the content side of things, just makes it a little bit easier to manage.
I think the matrix kind of presents an interesting, I think, cost benefit. It's kind of taken a table field and it's ditched the horizontal layout and gone with vertical. And with that, you get a ton of flexibility in how many fields and block types and stuff like that you can add, at the cost of your UI becomes a scroll fest of, you know, you can hardly do anything without scrolling for another page or two, and if you're using live preview, you're even scrolling more to be able to see your own content. So
it does make the mobile responsive layout easier, though, right? Because you don't have to worry about how am I going to display this horizontal table thing collapsed down into a mobile phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and there's yeah, I don't mean this is a terrible trade-off for everything at all. I think it's just one of those, if you want a tight UI design, you design a tight UI, and if you're in a position like a CMS like Craft, you by nature of your problem have to have an abstract UI to allow for, you know, 100 different field types that you didn't know existed.
Yep.
So. Yeah, that's right. In terms of flexibility, Matrix really does have it down. As you said, Andrew, from a responsive point of view, it's pretty important.
So Ben, you kind of took a different approach here. You didn't try to take a field that's being used in the matrix and kind of amp it up. You tried to build a field type that more or less replaces the matrix. Is that?
Yeah, I guess that's a fair description of what I set out to do. But I still stand by the fact that it's not necessarily a replacement to matrix. It's just, I mean, it does replace a matrix field, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it should replace matrix entirely in your Craft backend. That said, it is mostly you could think of it more like matrix on steroids, where it aims to look and feel like a matrix field, but just give you a whole bunch of different options and more features that.
Are you promoting steroid use, Ben?
I will not. I'll not confirm or deny that.
Well,
but you know, if you want a matrix on steroids, you know, that's your choice. You know, I'm giving you the option. But
so go on.
Interesting point you made before, Andrew, was that about Supertable was that it was sort of born out of well, you assumed that it was sort of born out of a way of making it easier for content managers to be able to, you know, more easily manage, you know, complex content. Whereas I think Neo was more born out of, or more aimed to be more streamlined for the developers, less so the content managers. Even though I put in a lot of effort to make sure that the layout for the actual content entry was as streamlined as I could. But adding the ability to reuse existing fields was probably the main thing behind Neo, which is something that a lot of developers really wanted with Matrix. So Yeah, so that's...
So can you elaborate that on that? Are you saying that whatever normal fields that we create, you can just use in a Neo block? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so if you create a section or an entry type in Craft, you get access to that field layout designer. And I essentially just took that field layout designer and stuck it into a block type for a Neo field, or so you end up reusing global fields or reusing fields that you can use in entries and sections and that kind of thing, but you use it on an actual matrix-like field type. Whereas with a matrix field, you have to create all the fields from scratch for every block type, and often it gets quite tedious, and you end up repeating or duplicating a lot of fields just for matrix blocks, and it makes maintenance as well. Like if you ever wanted to add an option to a drop-down menu that you duplicated across 3 or 4 matrix blocks, it makes that maintenance a lot more tedious. Whereas with Neo, if you're just using a global field, you just edit that one field, and it's, yeah.
I think that's one of the coolest things about Neo, and a lot of people request that sort of thing with Matrix itself. Yeah, the ability to be able to use already created fields in your Matrix blocks, because, yeah, as you say, a lot of people are just duplicating fields, and I do it all the time. I just think, right, I need to put a rich text field in this Matrix block, and then I've got to call it something different, and I've got to update that if I want to update all the other rich text fields. So, yeah. Definitely, I think it's a great addition.
Yeah, I mean, I classify that type of thing as administrivia work. It's like boring administrative work that needs to be done before I feel I can actually do my job that I want to do.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Now, Ben, your plugin Neo as well. It handles nested blocks. Have you solved matrix within matrix, or do people use Neo within matrix fields? Or are you creating an option around that?
So I really recommend using matrix in a Neo field, even though you can. But because of that, I don't want to say I've solved matrix within matrix, because it's quite a hairy problem. But it at least gives you the ability. It gives you the ability to sort of emulate matrix within matrix. It's not true matrix within matrix, because all you can do is just nest blocks within other blocks. You don't really get to add a matrix field, or you don't really get to add more than one set of repeatable content within a single block. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question at all.
It's okay. It's one to be wary of.
In Craft Slack, whenever I hear someone start the conversation with, so I have this matrix block that I'm embedding inside of a Neo field, I'm just like, oh.
I just imagine like a list of joins crossing the screen.
And I'm not saying that there are not valid times to do that. There definitely are, but most of the time, it's probably you probably should rethink how you're approaching it.
Yeah, I think if you really want a matrix in a Neo block, I think Super Table is actually a good use case for that, because at least it gives you a different layout. At least it gives you a more streamlined approach, as you were saying before, Josh. But yeah, I don't think I would ever use a matrix in a Neo block, just because the content, just because the UI is just.
Well, that's what I feel bad for. Like when they're building this thing, I'm like, oh my god, the client that gets this is going to be like, they're going to think they're entering the matrix. They're like, I don't even know what's going on.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges with, and like the Pixel and Tonic guys have said this, the UI is probably the most challenging part of all of this matrix in matrix style, and it is. It's probably the most challenging part, and Super Table doesn't get really close to solving it. and Neo's half the way there, I reckon, Ben. But yeah, it's a challenge. So it's much more, it's not really a technical thing of whether it can be done. It can easily be done. It's that your content editors are going to want to kill you.
Yeah, it's not whether you can do it; it's whether you should do it, right?
All right. Well. So I believe Josh, Ben, you both have a short demo of each of these plugins. Shall we move into those and kind of ask this question of how are people using your plugins? Can you give us a rough visual of what we're talking about here?
Sure. I'll go first.
Okay.
Here.
And for those viewers out there, we've asked Josh to start as his super table is kind of first manifestation of expanding on this matrix, the complexity that the matrix allows us. So let's take a look at super table.
Cool. So I've put together just it's not by any means a fully comprehensive guide to super table. There's I think you might have even had some past hangouts where we've talked about, or other people have talked about, layout builders, and in combination with Matrix and Super Table and even Neo. So there's some really cool things that people are doing out there. But this in particular, I'm just going to show essentially the 3 different types of fields you can do with Super Table. The 3 different types of layouts you can do. So look, it is really just a bit of a quick overview. But look, the first option is really just copying the table layout, but obviously just being able to use these different types of fields rather than just plain text. So you can select images, you can have a drop down, any other first party or third party fields you can have in your table fields. You can obviously reorder them, so it looks and acts very much like a traditional table field. The biggest problem is that when using a table layout, you've really got to be careful with the amount of fields that you want to add, because these columns, as you can see, there's enough room here for an asset field, and you can set the column widths for each of these things, which is great, but you really do want to take it easy with how many columns you add, because I don't know if I can resize my window here, but as you get smaller, you'll obviously start to run into issues with actually being able to tell.
CSS that's not planning for your situation.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, look, you can do all sorts of really cool things with just the table layout. But yeah, look, as I said, it really is just for probably, I would say, less than 5 fields typically. If you wanted to go further than that, I would recommend using the row layout, which, for example, looks a bit like this, where the labels are on the left-hand side here, and you've got your fields here, and really they just repeat like that. So again, you could do this exact same layout in a matrix field. That would probably just take up ever so slightly a bit more screen real estate. You'd obviously have the name of the field, any instructions, and then the text area. So really, it's just about streamlining that layout you'd get from Matrix. And again, you can reorder these things and delete stuff, and you can have all sorts of fields you'd like here. And yeah, that's sort of how it is. And this is really good for. I think we use this layout most often, just because, yeah, look, it's a streamlined way for content editors to edit their content. And look, finally, we use a static super table option where it looks exactly like a row layout, which I just showed then, but you cannot add more than one. So there will only ever be one of these blocks. And that's really handy for if you just want to visually group a collection of fields. For this case, we've got a banner image on our page. say you want to either enable it or disable it. You want to select an image. Maybe you want to have an overlay on it. You could do some crazy things with that, but that's just a simple drop down. Maybe you want to change the color of an overlay, add some text for a heading.
So I see this kind of improves on even if you were to use a matrix for this, you could create a matrix with a group of fields and limit it to one, but when you load your page, it still has the option to add your first block before those fields appear. So Super Table doesn't assume you want to click on that option to show the block. It just shows all your fields.
That's right. And really, you could do this with separate fields if you wanted to, of course. You could have banner image enabled, banner image, banner image overlay. You could have them all as separate fields. As you said, Ben, you could have it as a matrix block with just a max block of 1. But it still requires the user to go in, press a button to add the block, and then it adds it. I mean, that's not exactly rocket science, I suppose, but it's just a bit more streamlined. So look, I've just created a brand new entry. I go in here, it's ready to go. I don't have to press new or anything like that. So that's sort of explaining the 3 types of super table fields, and they're great on their own. But where it gets really interesting is where you can start to use a combination with matrix. So with a super table field, you can add a super table field to a matrix field, and you can do vice versa. And if you really, really want to, things get really crazy where you can have a super table field that has a matrix field which has a super table field. But that is pretty
optimization when you do that.
And look, that's something you can certainly do, but you really need to look at the templating side of things. You need to look into eager loading, caching, because you are doing a lot of queries doing that. So yeah, look, one of those things where you can do it, but you really need to think about whether you should do it or not. So anyway, so look, really, I'll show you where I really enjoy using just a matrix and a super table layout. Yeah, we've got, say, a collection of images we might want to use, and this is just a really simple way of essentially putting together a grid of images. Actually, I've even got one here. So, this is using our table layout. We've set widths on these columns just so that they don't go crazy. I wonder if live preview will work, actually. Hopefully this isn't too crazy for people's screens. Thinking. Yeah, that's great.
Live preview taking its time.
Cool.
There we go.
So, I mean, here's a bunch of images. We could have, you've got your image collection matrix block. We could have multiple ones of these if we wanted. So this just gives us a way to have repeatable content, or repeatable content within repeatable content. And you can adjust. This is just a simple image builder, but you could adjust the column widths of these things to build a bit of an image sort of layout. You can do all sorts of crazy things with it, but this is just one example I sort of have. Mm-hmm. But the real sort of benefit of that is you could do this in a matrix field, but you're really limited to how you want to output that on the page. So you could have these image collections as just a matrix field, or these image collections as a matrix field. But say you want to have these collection of images at the bottom of the page or at the top of the page, wherever. That's really difficult to do from a flexibility point of view in your templates. You just can't sort of create content around this. So another example is just using the row layout, which maybe you've got a collection of services. You want to group them by, I don't know, division, graphics. Then you might have a service, say branding. Into branding. And then say we do web design. Web stuff. And then you can keep going on like that. Maybe you've got another division. You can just sort of keep repeating stuff. So you can start to make some really cool layouts. This is obviously very cut down. We've done some crazy things in the past, but you can start to build quite a really cool layout, and it just gives you that flexibility to do some cool stuff. So yeah, so that's just a really quick, brief demo, which isn't amazingly exciting, but
Oh, no, it's good.
you can hopefully do some cool stuff.
Great. All right. Well, Ben, would you like to dive in with a demo of Neo?
Yeah, sure. Let's get this screen sharing. Is that coming up?
Yep, we see it.
All right. So I guess I'll just show briefly what Neo looks like from an editor's perspective. And if I just quickly remove all this pre-filled content, it kind of looks very much like a matrix. So we've got our blocks here and our block type buttons here, and if we click one, it expands out, looks very much like a matrix block, and this is entirely intentional. The aim in Neo was, I guess, consistency. So making sure that it didn't look out of place in the control panel, and if you were to mix it with other matrix fields, it wouldn't be jarring. Like it's easier for clients to sort of pick up and understand how a Neo field works after they've been using a matrix field. So I guess where it starts getting interesting is, as you probably see, this block has these tabs here, and this operates very much like a tabs in an entry type. So we can actually like partition fields within a block and hide fields behind other tabs if they're not as relevant or not as important for the content editor to see straight up. So with this text block, we've got one that we've got a settings tab, which we can set the alignment of the text. And I guess I'll live preview it if this works. So I guess we could add some content. And yeah, I mean, works pretty much exactly like you would expect a matrix field to work. But
you know lorem ipsum off by heart, Ben.
I've typed it that many times. I could probably keep going, actually.
That's awesome.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that's about as much as I got.
That's awesome.
So yeah, mastering a ancient and non-existent language is something I do in my spare time. Outside of developing there, of course.
My wife does too.
All right. So before I go any further with this this front end, I'll show you the back end, because this is where it gets very interesting. So that field body, we've got our field type Neo, and as you see, it looks a lot different to a matrix configuration editor. But it does actually kind of look like like this editor. So going back to what I said before, consistency, UI consistency was a major factor in developing Neo, and so I stole a lot of ideas from the control panel in various areas. So hopefully this isn't too foreign. Block types are created. It works a lot like a matrix field where you create block types, and you can obviously edit the settings of them. And this is where it gets pretty interesting. Is now we have a field layout tab. Instead of creating fields like a matrix block type, you actually just reuse global fields. So all these fields are created in the typical fields section, and I can just drag in tabs and reorder them and do all that fancy stuff like you would do with the normal entry type. We'll come back to the settings for a second, but another cool feature that Neo also has is the ability to group block types. So sometimes you end up with a lot of a lot of block types in your matrix field, and you get quite a long list of buttons at the bottom of your field, and sometimes if you've got a small screen size, it can actually you can actually bump that list of buttons down to a drop-down menu, and it's not ideal. You don't really want to see that on a desktop. So this gives you a way of sort of grouping specific block types into sections. So this field, as you could have seen in the editor, shows a media button, and then that gives me a drop down to add those other block types. So just so just for convenience sake, and you can also just, if you don't want to group them, but you can, but you're adding blocks after a group, you can just add a blank group, and it'll make sure it doesn't exist in a drop down. So the settings of a block type, though, I pretty much scoured the feature request page for Craft, and I've pretty much looked at most of the feature requests relating to the matrix and thought of ways I could put them into Neo. One of the highly rated feature requests for matrix is the ability to set a maximum block count on individual block types. And so I thought, well, that seems easy enough. I'll chuck that into Neo, and so now you've got a setting where we can limit block type, limit the amount of blocks per block type, and this can get real. This can be really useful for certain things, like if you only want to have, if you have a page builder that you only want to limit one block, one hero
banner
block type. Banner. You only want to limit one to the page, and so this will let you just select one, and then it'll just give you one option. The next option is child blocks, and this is where we start getting into the matrices and matrix territory. And this was not really my idea, because I found this. I found an interesting discussion on the feature request page about ways that matrix within matrix could be accomplished, and one of the ideas suggested was not to truly be able to have matrix fields added within matrix fields, but to sort of emulate that that functionality by allowing nesting of blocks. So much like a structure in an entries section, you can sort of set block levels. So I can add a block within another block in that same field, and one of the main things that people use this for, and probably the main reason I actually wanted this feature from the beginning, was the ability to be able to create a columns layout, like being able to create a layout editor with a matrix-like field that gives me the ability to create columns of blocks. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different hacks that you can do to sort of get around that, but I wanted something that was a little bit more foolproof. So as you can see, we've got this block type called column, and I've allowed the ability to add text blocks and image blocks within this column block type. And if we go to the editor here, I'll clear this out once again. Bear with me. You can see we have all our blocks as normal in the main level, but if we add a column block type, we get a new set of buttons here within the block column, which we can add more blocks to. And if I live preview this, you see how this works. So we add some text, some lorem ipsum, and can add another column here underneath, and add an image block, and say we add desk. Now this is probably going to be tricky with live preview, considering I've shrunk the screen size down a lot, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, zoom out if you want it. Yeah, but
so if we,
I think this is the mobile view of the.
Yeah. This is not ideal, but essentially what we got here is now we're able to add columns of content. And there's ways you can do that with matrix. You could create a dedicated block type that houses text and images, and it lays it out in a fixed column. But the cool thing about this is that it doesn't limit it doesn't limit you to only having text and images. I could have an image within this block type here, within this column as well. And so I'm able to create quite complex layouts just by adding one level of nesting with the matrix-like field.
Which is probably enough for most people's need for this type of thing, too.
Yeah, so this is primarily, well, not primarily, but it's the main thing that people use this for is being able to create columns, layouts, that's easily manageable by the back end, and it gives you a lot of flexibility too. And I guess that's the theme of today, is just flexibility with matrix. So there's more things you could do with Neo, and I'll show you one of those things. And really, there's a lot of cool things you can do with just the fact of being able to nest blocks within blocks. Another one is being able to create like a row of cards. So I can add a block type called cards here, and my cards block type has 0 fields. But that's all right, because we can still nest cards within them. And if we just do some quick content entry. It gives you the ability to do something along the lines of nesting a super table within a matrix block type, but just, I guess, in a Neo way. It's not as streamlined as something like a super table within a matrix block type is, but it's just the extra level of flexibility that you get with Neo that makes it beneficial to more towards developers and less so to content managers, but there's still an optimization there for content entry.
Yeah, I think you're being generous to the developers. You went to great lengths here, it seems, to keep a very consistent UI and allow for tabs to kind of segment content from layout controls and stuff like that. And those are big things for good UI around content editing as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess there's a lot of freedom that Neo gives you, and that with power comes responsibility, I suppose. So, although you can do a lot of pretty crazy things, and same with, I guess, Super Table as well. You really want to make sure that you don't go too crazy and make it a nightmare for your clients. But I give you the power, and what you do with that power is up to you, I suppose.
Now, in addition to UI considerations, are there performance considerations for doing this kind of nesting, or?
I suppose there is. I have put in a lot of effort to make sure that Neo is actually quite performant, so I've made improvements over some of the things that Matrix does as well. So, for example, if you have like a huge matrix field with a lot of content, one of the main slowdowns is when you save that entry or save that element with that matrix field. There's a lot of time spent doing things in the background, like saving the blocks to the database. One of the main things is generating keywords, because every time you save an entry, it has to go through all your fields, split up all the content in those fields into keywords, and then save those keywords to the database. And that can actually be quite a slowdown. And it's something I found with Neo, that if I had a whole bunch of blocks, and each of those blocks had like a rich text field that had like paragraphs of text in it, that's a lot of text that needs to be split up and tokenized, well, not tokenized, but split up into keywords and saved to the database. And my research showed that it was pretty much killing performance. So what I did was I just moved that to a task. So every time you save an entry, which I will do now, you'll see this generating search keywords task, and that just takes all that time saving an entry, saving the keywords out of actually the time spent coming back to the control panel. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
because I remember when I was saving a large matrix block. First of all, yeah, it took a really long time, but I also had to bump up some PHP variables to make sure it actually even saved.
Oh, really?
Once you reached a certain size. And the other thing is that, if you think about it, when you are saving a large matrix block, you're effectively resaving an entire section, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and it's smart. I mean, it looks like what you've done is you have taken some of that stuff and broken it out the same way that Craft did with when you resave a section. It kind of does that task and goes through and resaves all of those section entries.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. And there's also other performance enhancements as well. Like I monitor the content for each individual block, and if there's no changes, then it won't save that block. So you could have a page with 20 or 30 blocks, and if you change just one field within one block, it'll only save that single block. So you're not wasting time saving, as you said, an entire section of content. And it's just little things like that sort of speed things up. But
and to contrast that with the matrix, if you change one matrix block, it's going to resave all of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it resaves them all regardless, even if you don't change.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So so it's just things like that. And I suppose you could say that Matrix really wasn't designed to be, I guess, such a huge. Well, it's a big component of a craft site, but a lot of people will use it for now is like layout builders, and like I use that as well. I use it for layout builders as well, and you just end up with a lot of blocks and a lot of fields, and yeah. So I guess Neo is more aimed towards the power user.
Yeah, and that's one of my kind of pet peeves. Not that I don't love the matrix, but I kind of see it used for everything. And you can actually kind of paint yourself into the corner, or sorry, into a corner, if you kind of do the matrix block for everything. Because there are certain things that really probably shouldn't be matrix blocks, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. I guess if there's anything else anyone wants to.
Well, I guess my question about the performance is like, can you quantify, like, if you embed the matrix blocks the way that you were doing them, the way that you were nesting them? I mean, does that double the time it takes to query these things, or does it not scale that way, or how is that? How does that
your question is more front end oriented than control panel oriented, or not?
Yeah, I guess. Sure.
It's pretty much the same API, and it's the same underlying code that a structure is. So a structure is, I mean, it's just a list of entries, and you could think of Neo as pretty much the same thing. It's just a list of blocks that have structure to them.
Okay.
Where you get extra queries is if you're accessing. So I might switch this to my code real quick. So
the font size better be big, or Selvin is going to have your head.
I can make it bigger if I need to. So what I was showing before with the column layouts, this is, I guess, the code that drives it. So I have a body file here that renders the body field, and there's a bit of logic in here to make columns work the way I laid it out, because most people lay out what I've seen with people using Neo is that they create a row block type, and then in the row block type they create a column block type, and in the column block type then allow the other blocks to be able to be nested inside them. That's a fine approach. I try and make it a little bit more streamlined. I try not to go any deeper than 2 levels. So I have to resort to some template logic to get columns working without that extra row block type above it. But I digress. Let's continue on with what I was supposedly showing here. So where you get the extra queries is if we open up where I'm actually including this field type in the index page, I'm doing a level 1 filter on the Neo field, and that's going to just query all the level 1 blocks, obviously, and that's a single query. That's a single database query. Now in the block, in the body loop, block loop, I'm doing a common thing where I'm including the templates for each individual block type dynamically. So say I'm including the cards block type, and cards has individual, has like nested blocks inside that, as I showed before, where they have individual card blocks. And when you do a block.children, this actually will generate another database query. So it's a lot like, that's pretty much exactly how entries work. So if you queried a list of entries, and then for those entries you then query their children, they're separate queries. However, there's other ways you can do this. You can actually use a Neo field with a nav tag, and I don't know if you've I don't know if you know this, but the nav tag will take all those fields, all the elements in that you're looping through. So in Neo's case, it's taking all the blocks, and it'll apply all that hierarchical logic just in PHP. So you can create nested structures of you create a nested structure for a Neo field in your template by using the nav tag, and it will only do one database query.
And what about eager loading? Is that something that you do in here at all?
I don't do eager loading. I actually haven't implemented eager loading yet with Neo, but it's on the to-do list, and it's kind of already half implemented. So I just got to get around to actually finishing it. So. But hopefully that'll be in the next major release.
Nice.
And I guess that's it for me.
Great. A lot going on there.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think one of the it would be interesting to kind of do a deep dive into optimizing these types of fields and layouts, because I think, as everybody's mentioned so far, like we looked at the database, there's the element tables, there's the element table, the element internationalization table, then there's the content table, the normal content table, then there's the plugin content table, and the plugin meta tables, and very quickly you've got 10, 15 joins combining all these tables, and the page can take a really big hit in what it's loading. So,
well, I think it's cool that that Ben has implemented some optimizations already in terms of, especially from a content editor's point of view, the fact that it's not going to resave anything that hasn't changed. I mean, that's got to make a huge difference. Let's say you've got a Neo field that has several hundred blocks in it. That optimization has got to save a ton of time. Right?
Benchmark this in show craft how much quicker the Neo field is.
Oh boy.
We might be sitting here a while if I'm adding hundreds of blocks. So I don't know. I haven't gone that crazy with it yet. I think the most amount of blocks I've ever added would be in the 30s, I suppose. That's a lot. And it does help. It does help a lot, though.
Yeah, no, I think within the first week of Matrix coming out, I saw a question on Stack Exchange about, I can't add my 100th block.
That was probably me. No, I'm serious. That was probably me. That was the case that I ran into where, I couldn't add an additional block without upping some of the PHP variables. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's with the max input vars or something, isn't it?
Yeah, and post vars as well is another one some people have had to adjust.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really important what it was, but it ended up being convenient to compartmentalize data into a matrix block. And I was entering all this data, and it was like 2 in the morning, and then I hit save, and then it churned and churned and churned, and then nothing happened. Like, oh. So I went back, and all the work that I had put in there prior to saving it was just gone. Because, it sucked. So then, the clock went up to about 4 a.m. Re-entering it all after I fixed the PHP variable stuff. So that was great.
Ouch.
Yeah, and that's something that happens pretty quickly in a super table matrix scenario, because it just happens a lot quicker, because you are essentially doubling the post information that you're sending through. So yeah, it's a common thing people have certainly come across. But yeah, look, it can happen in just a regular matrix if you've got enough.
Yeah, I think you have really dumb like I did. Yeah.
I think you have a section in your super table README about it, don't you, Josh?
Yeah. Enough people complained about it. Sort of warranted that. Very impressed with your task implementation there, Ben. That's a really quite creative way to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Craft makes it easy for you to do that kind of thing. So.
Yeah.
So Ben, can I ask them a selfish question?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
How did you guys go about figuring this stuff out? Now, I realize that no one looking at this from a content administration point of view cares about this, but just me as a plugin developer, I'm curious, like, what was your methodology in building an entire, matrix replacement? Like, where do you even start? Just tearing apart the matrix code? Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, man, it's I don't even know. It's a lot of it's just reading a lot of code, just going through all the source files for the craft and just trying to figure out things, following the logic. And what I started with was actually just literally porting the matrix field into its own plugin. And
so you copied their code and put it into a plugin, and
yeah,
okay, all right.
That's where I started with Neo. However, I didn't actually end up using that. I started it, I got it working. It was a good exercise to sort of figure out.
Then you learned how to do it right.
Yeah, so I figured out how it was structured and like all the bits and pieces. I didn't know how any of it worked at that point, but it was, it gave me an idea of the scope of Matrix and sort of how it was put together. And then I actually started just from the front end. So I built all the, all the editor stuff, the configuration editor, and I built the input field templates and all the front end logic. I did that all first, and then I was like, okay, let's see how this works. Let's see how I can glue this to a back end. And
that's a smart psychological tool because look, I already built this thing. I have to make it
exactly.
Happen, right.
Yeah. Well, once you build the UI, you just have bugs to deal with too. Yeah. You're like, I tried to submit it and it's not submitting. I better fix that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had a good testing, I guess, framework.
So how about you, Josh? How did you approach, taking the table and turning it into a super table?
Yeah, so I essentially started just diving into how table works and how it was implemented. Obviously,
as you said earlier, you realized that's not going to work. Right?
Very quickly thought, yeah, this is going to need a little bit more re-architecturing than just how the table works. So, what did I do? This is like a year and a half ago now.
I didn't mean to ask you a tough question.
Yeah, no, I'm just.
I know how it is. I don't remember what I did yesterday, so.
Look, I started from the table. Quickly found out this isn't really going to work, so I started basically from scratch, trying to basically store the IDs of these fields that you would have to join to create this sort of relationship between these fields, and then just thought, I'm kind of doing this. I'm kind of starting from scratch on something pretty huge. I'm going to talk to Brandon about it. Hit Brandon up on Slack, had a chat to him. I think even I talked to you, Ben.
Yeah, we got to chat through the content tables. And
you've got your little credit in the super table README, I think, for it. And that was more to talk to you about your Sprout plugins and how you've dealt with, say, Sprout forms with the content tables being dedicated. Just to talk to you. So, yeah, look, talk to a lot of people. I started. I think I actually created a plugin called Set Table, which was basically what a static table is now. So certainly learned a lot from doing that. So look, after talking to Brandon, he actually recommended that I start with how the matrix is implemented. So certainly went ahead and did that. Sounds like similar to what Ben did. Grabbed all
you grabbed the matrix code and then pared it down, or did you just?
Yeah, so grab the matrix code. So looking at from a plugin point of view, looked at the services, the models, the records, how the settings are done, or even the JS and the CSS for it. Copied it into a plugin folder and basically set about essentially reading through every single line of code and understanding what it is, what it does. You know, that's tweaking it to see what breaks when I do this. You know, what happens with this. So it's really just went through really thoroughly doing that, and it's probably the best thing to do because you really quickly understand how this thing's put together from a conceptual level.
Now you say quickly, but this whole process does not sound like a quick process.
Quickly enough. over the course of several weeks. No, it's better than sort of starting from purely from scratch, I suppose, because you've got to really iterate on your ideas. So, to be honest, I'm basically saying Pixel and Tonic guys have done an amazing job at Matrix already, and Super Table basically leverages off that.
Well, and I think it makes sense for both of you to leverage what has already been done, because then you can do it in a way that makes sense in a craft context, right? I mean, you don't want to be maintaining something that is similar but solves the same problem in a completely different way. I mean, that would be crazy.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it's something that very early on, I didn't want this to be something I'm going to have to maintain forever. Into Craft 10 or whatever.
Too late.
Hopefully, my biggest wish is that something will be awesome in the next iteration or the next couple of iterations of Matrix or a new field type that's native that we can sort of bundle all this stuff into, which would be pretty awesome.
So you're hoping something comes out to kill your plugin. Essentially.
I certainly wouldn't argue it if something native came out. Or people can use Neo and then they can just bug Ben about it.
Oh, great.
You Aussies are crazy, man. We got Ben who thinks steroids are awesome, and then you.
I didn't say.
And then you want to commit infanticide, basically. You want to kill off your kid. All right.
Yeah, that's how we do things down here.
Yeah. All right, fair enough.
No. But yeah, look. If anyone out there is thinking of doing a similar sort of thing, just reading, understanding, messing around with stuff, it's really the best way to do it.
One of go on, Ben.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to add, I don't think all the documentation in the world's not going to be any better than just doing that, figuring out everything yourself as well. So, even if there is thorough documentation for plugin development that covers all these different use cases, it doesn't beat just following the code and figuring it out for yourself. So I recommend just doing that.
What I found, we have, I don't know how many, 5, 7 custom element types in our plugins now. And what I've found, and I compare Supertable and Neo to plugins with custom element types, is they're starting to really get into Craft's core and use some of the more advanced content organization features behind the scenes. And what I've found in each of, I created a table of this called Master the Elements on Straight Up Craft that kind of goes through all the native element types and all the different features you might find in them. But I find as we're creating custom elements, it kind of like what Ben was saying, just recreate another one, but it's almost this Frankenstein monster. Oh, I need a field layout, but that field layout's on the entry type, not the group. So let me go look at an entry on how that's done. Oh, I need this other feature. I need a content table. How is that done? Oh, that's how Matrix does content tables this way. And you find yourself kind of running around between each element type, looking at the code of how that implemented it.
I think you go ahead, Andrew.
No.
Well, I was just gonna add again. I think breaking down how a matrix works really, I think in particular sort of showed the power of the element system that Craft has. In just that. Matrix uses the element system in such a unique way, in such a different way to, the assets or the entries. And I just wanted to say there's a lot of thought put into how the backends of Craft's been put together, and I recommend giving a look over the Matrix source code if you're interested in. Writing custom element types just to sort of get an idea on some of the power and some of the things you can do with elements.
So are we all looking forward to rewriting our element types for Craft 3?
I can't say I am.
And has anyone
You know, I
started
will
doing that?
say, I feel I learned the most about craft during the alpha before the documentation was available. Because every question you had to just go to the code and figure it out. And I'm kind of looking forward to Craft 3 in the same sense that for a period now, if you want to be working with the product, you're just forced to go look at the code and figure it out. And after that, you're going to start getting documentation and plugin factory options that, while they're very good in many situations, they don't force you to learn the underlying system, and a lot of people use them as braces. And it's very tempting to use them as braces to get somewhere instead of just opening your editor and loading the page and trying to track down what's happening where.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a definite difference between a project that is a labor of love, which I think a lot of these projects that we're looking at today are, and something that is being done as custom dev work on a tight deadline for a client.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they kind of fall into two different categories in terms of how you're going to approach them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you don't want to be using the alpha product for your tight deadline for
Probably not. Yeah.
So, well, yeah, I thought it would be another fun hangout to do with you two would be kind of a field layout element type kind of hangout where we really looked at the dev around that, because I know as I got into those things for our plugins, it was a kind of a world of why does that relate to this? I
have a couple of questions for Brandon on some of the things that the field types actually do. It's still confusing to me now, so yeah, hopefully it's a little bit more clear in Craft 3.
Maybe we'll try to invite Brandon on and you guys back for.
No, Ben, I got it.
Yeah.
So we'll have like an Iron Chef style shootout where you can come up with a couple of different typical types of content that you would need to build, and Ben gets to use Neo, and Josh gets to use Super Table, and we see who builds it quickest, and then you can do your kind of review of which one you think is better, and they can win the award. What do you think? Like a shootout?
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah. All right, everybody ready?
Oh, you guys didn't know? We're doing that right now.
All right.
Well, Josh is ready. I mean, he works in his kitchen, so.
That's it. I'm done. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Well. I think another. Are there any other plugin topics we want to touch on while we're here? I think this is actually a whole new direction. Is a very interesting direction to take this topic too. That I think many people would find interesting. Any other questions around the plugins development side of things?
I think Craft 3 will be great to dive into. I have to say I haven't really dived into any of it yet. Just because, not that I'm sort of waiting for it to be stable, because it probably won't be for a while, but just because there's so much going on. But Andrew or Ben, have you been messing around with Craft 3 yet?
I've got one broken plugin in it.
Good start.
I swear it worked for 30 seconds, but I can't.
I have installed it, and I have been refactoring the templates for Plugin Factory so that it can spit some stuff out. But I haven't actually tested it yet, so I don't know how broken what it's going to spit out is yet. And I've done, I've ported some minor plugins over to run in it, but that's about it. I mean, the unfortunate thing is, I would love, honestly, nothing more than for someone to pay me to do that. But strangely enough, the people that have hired me don't want me to do really fun learning projects. They want me to actually build something for them. So unfortunately, I haven't had as much time available as I would hope. But so yeah, that's about as far as I've gotten, is that I haven't really done much into delving into the changes. I've really been focusing on from a syntactical point of view, what are the changes with plugins? Like, I haven't even really looked at the element type changes at all.
Yep.
Yeah,
I have downloaded the files, but that's about as far as I've gone. I'm waiting. Yeah, as you said, Josh, I'm waiting till it gets a little bit more stable.
Well,
before I,
realistically, you can say that you have a broken plugin then.
well, yeah, I mean.
yeah, that's all I have. I just ported our 2.x version over and called it broken.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, one thing I actually find ourselves doing about Craft 3, though, is we're trying to get to stable points in our plugins, and we're being very guarded about what features we start into right now, because, I mean, we're going to have a big task of switching things over to Craft 3. I think anybody who's written a bigger plugin is going to have to take some time to figure that out. But I think we're mostly trying to get stable, where hit benchmarks that we want to be at internally, and then try to be ready for that beta of Craft 3 to take the turn and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even really the size, right? It really depends on what areas of the system that you're touching. So you could have a plugin that is really, really, really straightforward to port over to Craft 3. It's really just like changing the name spacing and a couple of other really minor things. But if your plugin is doing stuff with element types and asset sources and stuff like that, I mean, there are some changes that I don't think they're going to be that bad. I think it's just a matter of taking the time to learn what those changes are and then implementing them. That is me having not done it. Saying that.
Well, at least we know all code estimates are usually wildly accurate.
Yeah.
All I have to say is that I'm glad that there's going to be a beta before it's actually released, in comparison to something like Expression Engine 3.
Yeah. Here it is, guys.
Where everyone just has to catch up 6 months later.
Right.
So that's pretty much my big thing I'm looking forward to.
So, Josh, are you porting Supertable to Expression Engine?
Oh, imagine that. Well, in fact, it's really how Matrix works. Matrix for Expression Engine is much more how Supertable works, in that I don't think in Expression Engine you can't have multiple block types.
No, you just keep expanding.
It's just a repeatable column, really. So that's essentially what Supertable is. So, yeah.
So you're saying there's a chance?
So it's done already.
What about you, Ben? Is that
I think after, let me tell you my knowledge about this specific situation. After you reach about 35 columns in Matrix in Expression Engine 2, you have to hack the CSS file. At a certain point, you need to hack the CSS file to get the UI to work out. Not that the UI is good. And then I think 35 or plus columns, you start to fail to even save your data properly because of the amount of stuff going on. And that was the site we inherited. I can't claim that I was the architect of that.
And Ben, what about you? Neo for EE? You could call it Inception or whatever you want.
Inception. It sounds tempting. But I think I'm going to have to pass on that one. I've never actually touched Expression Engine. I came from Joomla straight to Craft.
So it would be a challenge then.
Well, yeah, it would be a challenge. Is it a challenge I want to take up on? No. Doesn't sound, from the way you guys are talking about it, doesn't sound like something I really want to do.
Well, honestly, the reason it's on my mind is someone messaged me today. Someone who shall remain nameless messaged me today in the Craft Slack and said,
"That's Voldemort for anybody wondering."
Yeah, it said, "So, are you going to make a SEO-matic for Expression Engine?" And then the next sentence was, "Please don't kill me." Which was great.
That's funny.
Yeah. So did you kill him?
No, I just said no.
Oh, okay.
He's so polite.
Here's a tough question, Ben. What's one feature you miss from Joomla that you wish Craft had?
Okay, this is gonna sound funny, but I missed the fact that I just didn't care about updating Joomla. So with Craft, there's a little bit of like apprehension when you click the update button. It's like maybe one of these plugins is gonna have a little bit of an issue, but with Joomla it was like, well, we can't update it at all. I mean, it's just we know it's gonna break, so this is not updated. So I kind of missed. I mean, I don't know if "miss" is the right word, but you know.
Yeah, understand. It's a lot to keep up with that update icon.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing. I have never, I can honestly say never, done a craft update that has been problematic. And I really can't say the same thing for a lot of other platforms. And I think part of it is just the nature of the releases. You know, it's a whole bunch of smaller changes done more frequently. So there's less likely to be this monolithic thing that hasn't received enough testing, you know. And I totally get what you're talking about, Ben. I mean, there are some systems that I have that, I mean, God forbid anyone decides to go update it. I mean, who knows what the hell is going to happen, you know? And then you get frozen, right? Like, then maybe you can't upgrade the operating system because you're worried that you're going to break the version of the CMS system that you don't want to update because you're going to break all the plugins and the content that are on it. And then you're just kind of frozen in time. And it's kind of a bizarre situation.
One more. Go on if you. I was going to change the topic.
Oh, I was just going to say that you know, with, as you said, the incremental, you know, nature of Crafts updates, you know, being, you know, small little things that they fix, it makes it a lot easier. However, when the 2.5 update came out, there was a little bit of a panic in this office, where clients would update automatically when we didn't have restrictions set. But you know, we got over that hurdle.
We quickly learned about that config setting for disabling updates. Because we actually had it set, but we'd set it to only allow minor releases. And we thought, you know, a minor release, it's probably not going to break too much, except when they revamp the entire control panel. That's right.
Yeah, and your nav would just disappear on you and things like that in your plugin. So I had a question back to that. I think we're reaching a limit here, but I wanted to maybe touch on one more thing in these field plugins. I think one big decision you made in your plugin, Ben, was to kind of make fields craft again, or give fields back to craft. And we see a couple. Josh, are fields in Supertable context specific to Supertable?
Yes. So they have the context of a Supertable. So it's pretty much exactly how Matrix does. You have to create fields specifically for Supertable, so you have to repeat them.
Got it. And we do that in Sprout Forms as well, and it's a purposeful decision on our part as well. We feel in the case of forms, people who are doing a lot of landing pages or something kind of crank out a ton of landing pages, and if you let every field be global, all of a sudden you have 20 different headline fields for the 20 different landing pages that are like slightly different copy or something like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
I'm curious if like Neo, have you seen any limits of how people are creating fields or on when fields start to get unwieldy there, or is it generally like it works out? People, I know on some of our sites when we start getting similar field names, it's almost hard to tell them apart.
Yeah. I do see that a lot. Well, I know personally, I tend to use fields that don't have an instruction to them a lot with Neo fields, because you know you tend to sort of tailor a field to a section when you add instructions to them. Well, it's really hard to write instructions that are not context specific. So I guess one of those limitations is that it kind of means that you have to rethink your approach almost entirely from the beginning of building a craft site to account for the fact that you may use these fields in like a Neo field. That said, Neo actually is compatible with a whole bunch of other plugins, like another plugin of mine called Relabel, and I'm first to admit it's a controversial plugin in that it lets you rename the names of fields and the instructions per like entry or entry type or per whatever. Mm-hmm. So in the case of Neo, you can actually relabel fields on the block on each individual block types.
And you're just storing that data separately, kind of on your own.
Yeah. So I it's a light touch plugin. I store it in its own table, and it just applies. It just adds. It replaces the labels with JavaScript. So that's one way to get around it, and I mean, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect approach, but it works. It works for a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Got it.
Let me ask you a question, and this is actually for both Ben and Josh. So since Neo and Supertable are your babies, do you find yourself kind of going out of your way to use them whenever you have a content problem that needs to be solved? Or do you find yourself also using Matrix or using some other things as you see fit?
Yeah, we don't. It really is just the problem. Whatever the problem is, we'll pick the best field type for its use. Like we're not sort of too biased about using. You have to use Supertable over Matrix, because it's mine. It's really we probably most often use Matrix for a lot of stuff. It's really just only where, like, I think the most common time we use Supertable for content is something like for a client site, you might have a team, team members or the staff, where they just want an image, they just want a title for the person, the position, and maybe a description. And it's just because if that same layout is done in Matrix, it just makes the page a little bit longer and unwieldy for the client to use, and the row table just works out really well. I think for every site that we do, we have just a static Supertable in the globals for social media, where it's basically just Facebook, Google+, Twitter. They can just add their stuff in there. You could, of course, do that in a matrix or as single fields. It's just something to keep it together. So, don't know if that really answers your question, but we really don't really mind.
Well, I mean, let's say that you're solving a particular content problem, and Supertable, you're using it for it, but it's not really fitting exactly the way you want it to. Do you just go in there and fix or change whatever the behavior is that you want? In other words, you find yourself tailoring it to, like you're doing a particular problem for a client. Are you saying, well, you know what, this isn't working out the way I want it to, so I'm just going to go change how Supertable works?
I was in like change the plugin stuff specifically for that site.
Just in general, like maybe there's an approach that would be better if it worked X, Y, or Z, or a feature like you want to limit it to X number of table entries or whatever. In other words, do you kind of become your own user submitting feature requests when you're building stuff out?
Oh yeah, definitely. So anything that we come across when we're using our plugins, we'll definitely, if we go, hey, this is a problem, I'll either just put it down as a feature request on the plugin page or whatever, or do it and then actually integrate it into the Supertable thing. I don't think there's ever been a case where we've had to hack something for the plugin, because if we needed to do that, we'd really question, well, should this be available to everyone, really?
Right.
If that sort of makes sense.
What about you, Ben? Do you find yourself being biased towards using Neo on your projects? I mean, and it's it's perfectly acceptable to say yes, because there's a reason why you built this thing in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Which is that Matrix maybe didn't work exactly the way that you wanted it to.
I can't say that I'm looking for ways to use it in every situation. But as you said, I did build it for a reason, and
Right.
I use it a lot. Like for the stuff that we do here, we require a lot of flexibility with our sites. So more often than not, I'm using Neo for a lot of different things, and I only have a handful of matrix fields per site usually. Maybe not even a handful, maybe only even a couple. Because I just find that the features I added with Neo, it's because I'm reusing fields. I've thought about it. I've thought about it right from the beginning of building the site. Because, as I said before, with Neo, you kind of have to sort of rethink your approach almost right from the beginning when reusing fields in a Neo field. So usually, if I'm creating a new field, like a matrix type field on a site, I'll usually already have all these like fields that I could use within the block already created in my global field section. So I kind of figure, well, might as well just use a Neo field for that because it's just easier for me.
Right.
So, but I mean, if I'm starting on a fresh install, like usually we build sites from a boilerplate, like most craft developers do. But if we, for whatever reason, we start a fresh install, most of the time I won't use a Neo field because usually at this point I'm like very much tailoring the site to its content, which is what Crawford is designed for. So a lot of times I won't even install Neo or really many plugins at all. It's at that point it's like trying to get the most out of what Craft offers, and just fitting it like a glove to the content for that site. But with a boilerplate, the starting point that kind of has to be versatile to a lot of different use cases. That's I guess when Neo is a real benefit. It's where I use it a lot. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've run into cases like that where, maybe something that I've written doesn't do exactly what I want. And I'd be like, well, guess everyone's getting a new feature. Right?
I find the hardest thing about those features is having the time to step back and really plan them out, because often it's like it's a moment when you're, oh, I need this now. Yep. And often putting a feature in your plugin, if you do it quickly, you regret it a couple months later because you didn't plan it in a way that's going to scale with you or something. So
I kind of look at it from the point of view of, at some point, I'm going to need to refactor and redo this code anyway. I mean, realistically, right? And while I do try to make sure that what I'm doing makes sense, I probably am more aggressive about just kind of putting it in there, because as with any project, and I say this all the time, I mean, the first time you do it, you learn how to do it right, and then you can go back and you can redo it,
I've always felt like,
fortunately,
the perfect client relationship would be, we're going to build this website for you twice.
Yes.
The first time.
It would be. I mean, that would be entirely ideal.
Yeah. Great.
Not going to do that, though.
All right, everyone. Any final questions we want to ask? Great. Well, thank you for coming out, Ben and Josh. It's been a pleasure to have you here and visit the Australian time zone.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for accommodating us.
Yes. Thanks, Ben. It's been fun.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to do this again sometime. Till then, this has been another Straight Up Hangout. It's a weekly event presented by Barrel Strength Design and Pixel and Tonic. We'll see you again next week. Have a great evening.